Could survival tactics of the past be the solution for modern struggles? Welcome to Conflict Theory. I'm your host Max, a sociology student interested in how inequitable resource distribution impacts American life. In this episode, we'll discuss mutual aid and how it helped African Americans endure the Great Depression. We'll explore this topic together through some basic concepts and historical examples, and by the end, you'll hopefully leave with some helpful context and tools for handling today's world of rising prices, scarce job opportunities, and shrinking social safety nets. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. So first things first, what is mutual aid? Well, according to the National Education Association, it's the voluntary peer-to-peer exchange of resources and services for mutual benefit. For example, if my neighbor asked to borrow a cup of sugar and I gave it to them, they wouldn't actually owe me a cup of sugar. I'm just trying to help someone get what they need, and in the process, I'm rewarded a stronger relationship with them. Plus, let's say in the future I need an egg. Now I could just go borrow one from them. It's important to note, though, that these kinds of exchanges are reciprocal, not transactional, meaning people show they care about each other by casually helping them when they need it, as opposed to doing favors as investments that must be returned in equal value. Looking back to our example, a cup of sugar might be worth less money than an egg, but if I asked my neighbor for an egg after I gave them sugar, they wouldn't charge me the difference in their values. They would just happily give me the egg if I needed it, knowing I'd do the same for them. The National Education Association attributes the origins, or at least the popularity, of mutual aid to the world's indigenous communities, noting that their core belief in the interconnectedness of all life has led them to practice this for millennia, even helping them survive colonization. Now that we've covered the basics of mutual aid, let's see how this manifests in Black communities throughout the Depression. We'll walk through 3 articles from Black-owned newspapers of the era and go over their context. Let's start with the Washington Tribune's 1934 report entitled "First Self-Help Project Starts Here." 2 landmark events led into this story: the Great Migration, followed by the Great Depression. This was when many African Americans fled the rural Jim Crow South for the urban industrial North in the 1910s, seeking social and financial opportunities. Unfortunately, the country then entered a severe economic downturn from 1929 until 1939, leaving many Black migrants unemployed, unhoused, and impoverished in northern cities. The article states that in the middle of the Depression, the D.C. community addressed these issues locally by creating the Northeast Self-Help Cooperative, the area's first mutual aid organization. This would be housed in a laundry donated by its leader, Nannie Helen Burroughs, and renovated by the FERA. That stands for the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. This was part of U.S. President FDR's New Deal legislation, which aimed to provide citizens resources and opportunities during the Depression. Notably, though, these programs often failed to adequately support Black Americans because they didn't account for additional disadvantages this demographic faced on top of the Depression, like systemic racism. The interesting thing about this particular piece is that it features a real-life example of this issue. The only government assistance that the Northeast Self-Help Cooperative received was funds for building renovations. Nothing else. The co-op offered many crucial resources and services, like centers for emergency relief, sewing and canning, a commissary, a barbershop, laundry, shoe repairs, and garment making. All of this ran on donations and volunteer work from active community members, like the Northeast Joint Citizens Association. In all that the Northeast Self-Help Cooperative accomplished, New Deal support played an extremely small role. Moving on to our second newspaper article, we have Pilgrim Benevolent Society from the Omaha Guide in 1939. Some important context here is that many resources and opportunities were inaccessible to Black Americans during the Great Depression. Although this disparity was especially evident in northern cities due to their large populations, like we saw in our first source, this was a nationwide issue. The paper states that in 1898, an African-American man named Solomon W. Walker started a mutual aid organization known as the Pilgrim Benevolent Society. This aims to provide Augusta, Georgia's Black community life insurance and stable white-collar jobs. Walker pursued the initiative with family support and money he earned delivering groceries. To cover large government fees, it later merged with other local mutual aid groups, becoming the Pilgrim Health and Life Insurance Company. By the Depression era, this offered individuals burial funds in exchange for a low monthly fee, and generated hundreds of jobs in the process. The unique thing about this mutual aid organization is that rather than providing Black Americans necessities for life, it helped them manage death. And while that may appear a grim response to struggle, it makes sense when you consider the broader context. For instance, the South was left impoverished by the Civil War, economically relied on crops that were declining in yield and value, and then the Great Depression exacerbated its lack of resources. There weren't enough community goods to pool them like Northern mutual aid groups did. Additionally, funeral and burial assistance were long-standing forms of mutual aid among African Americans, having established burial societies as early as the 1770s. Rounding off our newspaper articles, we have Colored Fraternalists issue monthly journal from the Lexington Advertiser in 1929. This promotes a mutual aid organization known as the Mississippi Benevolent Society and its publication, The Benevolent Echo. It describes the Echo as monthly columns and news for the group's members and sponsors, and the society itself as an insurance provider for the local Black community. Similar to the Pilgrim Health and Life Insurance Company from our second source, the Mississippi Benevolent Society offered affordable life insurance policies. Not only that, though, they also covered medical expenses like sickness and surgery, and disasters like fires and storms. These protections were vital there during the Great Depression, given that few people could afford medical bills, firefighting had weak infrastructure, and the Mississippi River would flood regularly. The organization was also known for community philanthropic efforts, like raising money for children's education, purchasing land, and building homes. Now, before we wrap up the episode, I'd like to go over one more source with you: Historical Perspectives on Social Welfare in the Black Community. This is a peer-reviewed article written by Wilma Peebles Wilkins and published by Virginia Commonwealth University in 2006. It argues that students in the U.S. studying social work and social policy should be taught the history of African American mutual aid. This is because it illustrates how infrastructural failures in powerful institutions, like exclusion and oppression, cause community resource shortages. For example, African Americans on plantations had to create burial societies as a result of enslavers murdering them and working them to death. Formerly enslaved people had to band together to survive and maintain their freedom, given that the rest of society largely supported their bondage and would deny them basic resources. And African American nurses had to form their own humanitarian network due to Black communities facing extreme health disparities and the American Red Cross rejecting them for their race. These students learning the role racial prejudice has played in American government and culture equips future social workers and lawmakers to identify and dismantle systemic racism in their fields. Collectively, our sources illustrate how ordinary people supporting one another is extremely important, especially when traditional resource providers fail to sufficiently serve their populations. As I'm sure you're aware, resource inaccessibility still causes great suffering in America today, especially among the marginalized. Many can't afford groceries or find employment and even lack secure neighborhoods. The good news is that although systemic inequality persists, community engagement still remains an effective solution. The power of this solidarity can be seen in modern everyday people making food pantries in their neighborhoods, teaching each other trade skills, and driving children of immigrants to school to avoid parent ICE abductions. There are indispensable lessons in past and present stories of mutual aid. Thank you for taking time to explore a few of these with me. I hope you feel a bit more informed and empowered to help your community and ask others for help when you need it. Until the next episode, take care. See ya.